We're going off script today in honor of Earth Care Sunday. You get a reading from Job instead of a reading from John. This is Job chapter 12 and verses 7 through 10. Job is speaking here, and he's trying to make sense of the calamities that have befallen him. And he says this. Listen to what the Spirit might speak into your life in this reading from the book of Job. But ask the animals, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In God's hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of every human being. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So the second Sunday of Easter, or Eastertide, as I like to call it, to sound a little more poetic. It's usually dedicated to doubting Thomas. I don't know if you've noticed that, but on the low Sunday where very few people attend church, the Sunday after Easter, you always get the reading from the Gospel of John about doubting Thomas, about how the risen Christ appeared to all the disciples, but Thomas was down at the convenience store getting, I don't know, his favorite kind of dental floss or something. And so Thomas shows up, and they're all like, hey, we just saw Jesus. And he's like, no, come on. I don't believe that. He understandably doubts, and Jesus makes a special trip back just for the sake of the one doubter who comes to believe. I like that story, though it has nothing to do with the sermon I'm about to preach. I like that story because doubt is integral to the life of faith. You can't have faith without doubt, because faith is not the memorization of facts. Faith is the domain of hope and dreams. But our eco-justice team has a booth today at Mount Lebanon's Earth Day celebration. And so we decided to diverge from the lectionary, that's our calendar of Bible readings, in order to meditate on our call to live as caretakers of God's creation. Job says, but ask the beasts, or the animals, and they will teach you. The birds of the air, they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and even they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. In God's hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of every human being. Here in the Bible's oldest book, Job struggles, the character Job, struggles with the question of the meaning and the value of life, but not just human life, all life. And he instructs us to look at the birds of the air. Look to them as our teachers. Look even to the plants that grow. They will show you something about God, something that no guru or sage could ever tell. They will show you that God's life is in all living things, and that even our breath is on loan from the one who loves the fish and the birds. God's life is active in the world around us. And so our calling is to respect and protect God's mysterious world. Let's talk about birds. I've been thinking so much about birds lately. I don't know why I've been thinking about birds. I'm maybe just that age now. Last week, I attended a lecture at my old alma mater, Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, where my Old Testament professor from decades ago gave a lecture. And he lectured on the wonderful Psalm 104. If you're into the whole thing about God's care for creation, read Psalm 104. It's a beautiful psalm about God's presence in creation, God's love for creation, God's provision for creation and for all creatures. And in that lecture, Dr. Creech suggested that birds hold a special place in the Hebrew Scriptures, and especially the Psalms. He said that the Psalms treat them as innocent creatures that need to be protected and sheltered. But in the Hebrew Bible in general, they're also seen as divine emissaries, almost like little angels. They come with messages from God. You've got Noah's dove, and Elijah's ravens. Of course, now Dr. Creech is an Old Testament guy, which is way better than a New Testament guy. They're much more fun. But he did not mention the fact that Jesus, too, in the New Testament, treated birds as these happy, carefree creatures. I can't even say it, much less be it. These happy, carefree creatures who are just dependent on God for all things and who don't worry about anything. A few months ago, early on a Sunday morning, I was going over my sermon manuscript, practicing what I preach, and worrying that the sermon just didn't go as deep as I wanted it to go. I often discover that on Sunday mornings when I'm going over the script. It just doesn't get where I want it to get. I can't even remember now what the sermon was. It was back in February. I wasn't satisfied with it, and as I pondered this disappointment, I poured myself some more coffee, and I happened to glance out the window to see 3 lovely birds, all pecking at the little berries at the base of our red cedar tree, which actually is a kind of juniper. So they're eating these little juniper berries off the ground outside the window. There was a blue jay in its calming robe of blue and white. And there was a red cardinal brilliant against the February snow. And best of all, there was a red-headed woodpecker with a red head and black and white stripes. And I thought how in 15 years I had never seen such an array of colorful birds eating those dried up juniper fruits. And somehow it made me feel a little better about the sermon that I didn't want to have to preach that morning. The imperfect sermon that I had to give that day. Those dear little birds, they only eat those juniper berries when there's nothing left to eat at the end of the winter. But here they were, making do, feasting on these gin-flavored berries beneath my window, and they were preaching a sermon to the preacher on a Sunday morning. Don't worry about it, they were saying. People will find nourishment where they need it. The Spirit will speak nourishment into people's lives. It's like a handful of juniper berries. We'll come and feed on those when we need to. Don't worry about it. We don't plant, and we don't reap, and we don't sow, and we don't gather into barns, but there are juniper berries here for us. You'll find a handful of juniper berries if you need it, and the Spirit might give someone what they need, even from an imperfect sermon. That was the bird's words, not mine. A bit of a joke. And I've been watching birds a lot lately, feeding them, trying to identify them. I took a beginner's bird watching class up at Oil Creek State Park and discovered that birds, like cats and dogs, have some really human characteristics about them. They're protective of their young. Many bird fathers are very active in parenting. They use vocal calls much the way we use our voices. And they seem to have emotions. Okay, just one more thing about birds, maybe 2. I learned that cowbirds are the worst parents in the natural world. They don't build nests. They don't feed their young. What they do is find a nice little family of birds and go and lay their eggs in that nest so that that family can raise their children. And if the host family gets wise to the cowbird's trickery, they might push the cowbird egg out of their nest, and the cowbird will come and get revenge by pushing all of the eggs that belong in the nest out of the nest. Now, is it wrong for me to judge a cowbird according to human moral standards? This is a real question. Is the cowbird just made that way, or is it evil? Did it choose evil? Does it have a choice in the matter? Because to me, a cowbird looks lazy and irresponsible and spiteful and vengeful and murderous. What to do with this question? Because it seems to raise other questions about human nature. I went off script. On the other hand, many years ago, I've told you before, my daughters and I rescued a mourning dove from the blueberry nets that we had on our blueberry bushes. And I used mustache scissors to free that little bird's wing, its gimpy now wing, from the tangled net where it was stuck. And that little dove relaxed into my hands because she knew that I wasn't going to hurt her, that I just wanted to help her. And then for 2 or 3 years thereafter, every summer, that dove was my pal. She would follow me around the yard when I was out there working, and I knew it was her because of her gimpy wing. What was she doing? Did she want something? Was she just being friendly? Was she just accompanying me? She had some feeling, some experience of life that gave her a sense of meaning. I don't know. Job says, ask the beasts, they will teach you. Ask the birds of the air, they will tell you. Ask the plants growing out of the earth, even they can teach you. Ask the fish of the sea, and they will declare to you, even though they don't have voices. In God's hand is the life of every living thing. Every living thing. Think about that. Lichens and mosses and, I don't know, bacteria? Every living thing. It's nicely stated. It names the glory and the sweet, mysterious life that are present in all things, all living things, even plants. Job, as I'm often telling you, is the Bible's oldest book. Its theology reflects a lot of beliefs that were held by various peoples in the ancient Near East before Jewish theology or Jewish religious thought had started to develop. It's also one of the most poetic books in the Bible. And so whether you like its troubling message or not, it is an aesthetic work of art. And if you love poetry, I would invite you to dive in. In Job, the great God has a loyal servant named Satan. Satan is not God's enemy in Job. Satan is God's servant. Satan means the adversary, and it's Satan's job to test the faithfulness of human beings. Satan's not a bad guy, he's got a job, and his job is to test people. The belief in some evil devil who opposes God, who's kind of almost the evil God, that doesn't develop until that quiet era between the New and Old and New Testaments. And then we see Satan emerging in the Gospels as a sort of prince of darkness. But that's a later development. Early on, Satan was God's servant. In any case, in this passage about plants and fish and birds, Job is reflecting on the ways that God's life and power are present in all living things, and how humans join with all the other creatures in the holy task of showing God's goodness and God's love and God's creativity to the world. You know, just as an aside, I have to do this. All this talk of evil birds versus good birds, cowbirds versus mourning doves, and a faithful good Satan versus an evil devil, this raises questions about human nature, doesn't it? I mean, if cowbirds are just made to be the way they are some people just made to be the way they are? Not that it excuses them. Or does it? I don't know. If cowbirds are supposed to do the things that we deem lazy and irresponsible and spiteful and murderous, is it possible that some people are just bent that way too? Sometimes when I'm faced with an especially immoral person, I think to myself with a bit of pity, oh, so you're the hapless soul that got assigned this part in the drama of life. You're the one whose job it is to play this part. If some birds are made to be evil and some are made to be good, is the same true of people? Maybe the difference is that we know the difference between good and bad, right and wrong, most of the time. That could be the topic of another sermon, but would have to take more than 20 minutes to dig into that. The point is that animals seem to have emotions, and maybe plants do too. Birds get angry. Birds can carry out revenge. Dogs certainly get jealous. Even cats become protective. Trees can send messages through their tentacles, their roots, their tendrils. Our planet is full of wonders that we're just beginning to discover in this age. There is life and love and feeling and communication going on all around us at all times. But we usually miss it because we mistakenly believe that human life and human love and human communication are the only ways to live and love and communicate. But ask the beasts, ask the birds, ask the plants, ask the fish. They will teach you of the mysterious ways of God's life, moving through all things. The book of Job places all of life, including plant life, within the realm of God's care and God's love. This has enormous meaning for anyone who wishes to follow and to know God, to lead a life aligned with God's purposes and God's presence in our world. What are a few things that this means? It means that we need to take seriously the well-being of all life, right down to the mosses. We need to take serious the existences that God wished into being. I once heard someone, he was a member of this church who has since left. I once heard someone say, there's oil up there in the Arctic and we're not allowed to drill for it because of some owl? Well, yeah. We have to share the world with owls, don't we? We've got to share the world with them. Not everything in this world can be about turning a profit. Creation isn't ours alone. We have to share it with the abundance of creatures that God put here. If God in their infinite wisdom placed a snowy owl as the guardian at the door of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, then humans in their infinite teachability need to humble themselves enough to value a form of life that they don't entirely understand and that they could never replace or create. We've got to share the world. It also means that some of the divine nature is living not just in us humans, but in the animals. And you dog lovers have known that all along. And so our calling as stewards of God's creation is to protect and preserve life as much as possible, always treating it with respect, all of life. And I will allow you to connect those dots for yourself in the ways that make sense for you. Here are a few examples from my life, but if you don't do it this way, there's no judgment in what I'm about to say. For me, it means not eating veal. I know it's delicious, especially when it's deep fried and breaded. But when I think of the way that animal is treated, I just can't support that. I don't want to be a party to that. And harder still is lobster, because I don't want to be a party to that either. The other animals are on their own. For me, in my own poor attempt at landscaping and gardening, it means putting on rubber gloves and uprooting poison ivy by hand, rather than spraying it with that awful poison which gets into the water and the soil and the air and can cause cancer. In fact, I try to avoid all herbicides and pesticides. It means honoring creation as best I can, as best I know how, and I'm sure I'm making mistakes, and I'm sure I have blind spots, but we got to try. What does all of this mean? It means walking this world humbly, with eyes of wonder, in awe of all the mystery and the life that it contains. Stuff we never notice. It means marveling at the way even the birds can express love and anger. It means observing the behaviors of living creatures. It means learning from them when we can. It means recognizing the divine spark in every living thing, reaching for the light, trying to be happy, trying to play its part, trying to hear the message that they might be trying to share with us. And finally, God's presence in all of life means seeking God in all the living. It's hard enough to do this just with humans, but to do it with the animals, that's harder still. in the plants and the trees and the fish and the birds of the air, in the beasts of the field. This world that God created is good. It is worthy not of our exploitation, but of our loving use, our loving and careful use, and of our protection, and of our respect. It's our only home. Let us walk this world humbly, lovingly, in awe of its beauty, of its provision. Let us live lives that are in touch with the many others with whom we must share this world, especially future generations. Ask the beasts, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you. The fish of the sea will declare to you. In God's hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of every human being. In this Easter season, in this springtime, in this time of new life, how are you going to serve God by loving the birds and the fish and the plants and the animals? Amen.